So for English 3 people or anybody reviewing later, we are going to talk about sentence variety because it's its own section on the grammar rubric. You will also be asked questions on the multiple choice part. Again, that's English 3 stuff that we'll talk more about, but on the multiple choice part, they're going to give you sentences and ask you to combine them, tell you to make them fancier, or ask you what's wrong with the way that they combined it, stuff like that. The grammar stuff does come into play on the SOL. Couldn't tell you. I mean, it's how many is the actual SOL, or how many would be about this? It's kind of mixed in with everything. Like sometimes they'll give you a paragraph and say what's missing, and you could say sentence variety. Sometimes they'll give you a sentence and they'll say make this with better variety. So it's a little bit of everything. I would say if I had to put a number on it, like 10-15% would be these kinds of questions. Most of it's going to focus on those major and minor details that we've been working on too. That's the biggest part of both SOLs, the writing and of the essay and the multiple choice. Okay, so a simple sentence. This is just a complete independent clause. Why are you not typing? There we go. Yes, independent. There we go. Clause, which remember is just the fancy way of saying a complete sentence. But this could be, so going all the way back to our subjects and predicates, it's going to have a subject and a predicate. Don't write that large because it's going to shrink it as I type. So a subject and a predicate, but it could be a compound subject, could be a compound predicate, could be a compound subject and a compound predicate. As long as it is just one set of subjects and predicates, it's an independent clause, stands on its own. So if I say, you are taking notes, that is a simple sentence. I have the subject, you, and what are you doing? Taking notes. If I said you and the person beside you are taking notes, still a simple sentence. Even though I made a compound subject, it's still a simple sentence. So as far as the scoring on the SOL goes, this is not sentence variety just because I add extra subjects and extra predicates. Making it you and the person beside you are taking notes and studying for a test. Still a simple sentence, even though I had two subjects and two predicates. Or compound subject, compound predicate. Well, so I'll walk you through it. Why are you not typing? Go to the typing. Oh my goodness. There we go. Go up. So a compound subject, this is when you have two or more, I'll put 2 plus for the sake of space, 2 or more independent clauses combined with either fanboys, which are for and nor, or yet and so, or a semicolon. But remember, if you go back to our notes about fanboys and semicolons and stuff, we approached it from more of a punctuation issue, or I think it was in the clauses, types of clauses handout. The semicolon can only be used if the second sentence sort of completes the idea of the first sentence. You can't say, you are taking notes, what are you having for dinner? Those two, that idea is not completing, you are taking notes. But if you say, let's see. I said, you are taking notes and you will study them later. Here I used one of the fanboys, But remember that comma rule, and I will write it on there again in a second if you need it again. Or you could say you are taking notes, and then to finish that idea, the purpose of taking the notes is to study them later. You could use a semicolon. There are times where you do a semicolon and a word after that, but that's a different, that adding that extra word, it's still a compound sentence. So I'm not going to throw that one in there. If you had said you are taking notes, semicolon, furthermore, you will study them later, that would still count, but like I said, I'm not trying to throw that at you right now. If you want to look at that, that's going to be on that punctuation handout that we did on the snow day. No. So for this one, zoom in a little more so you can see, because it keeps shrinking it when I type. Remember, all caps, remember. If you have complete sentences, so if you have independent clauses on, has to be both, also going to bold it, on both sides of the fanboy, which are called coordinating conjunctions. Try and shrink out before it will let me. Use a comma before the coordinating conjunction. So that's where I have up here, comma and. Because you are taking notes is a complete sentence. You will study them later is a complete sentence. If I had said you are taking notes and will study them later, no comma, because will study them later is not a complete sentence. It has to have a complete sentence on both sides. So you are taking notes, complete sentence. You will study them later, also a complete sentence. See them more easily. I really wish it would stop moving when I do that. Sorry. You're okay. Question so far? Okay, next up you have complex sentences. These are the ones with the subordinating conjunctions. So that's like because, while, since, even though, etc. There's dozens of those. And they are combining one independent clause with a dependent clause. Because remember, once you put one of these words on it, like because, while, since, even though, it becomes dependent. It is no longer a complete sentence if it has that word attached. So you can start with two independent sentences. But for the sake of variety, you want to throw one of those words on so you can combine those sentences because you don't want to sound like a robot. So you use those words, but the second you add one of those words, you got to watch out that you don't make a sentence fragment. Because if I say, I was late to class, complete sentence. If I say, because I was late to class, it is no longer a complete sentence. It needs the rest of the thought. The thought is not complete unless you keep going with an independent clause. Like, because I was late to class, I got a bad grade.
You have to have something to support it.
Correct. It depends. It's called a dependent clause because it depends on support from an independent clause.
So would that still get you, like, if you was to, like, just add on to what you just said, like, on an SOF, like, type of essay, would that just be, like, good enough?
Like, yes, this would count as the sentence variety, is doing this. There is one step up that's better, or I guess I should just say it's more complicated, which tends to translate as better on tests. But this is a good approach to take. Also, my tip here. So, tip. It's getting really frustrating that it keeps moving. Okay, tip. Mix up starting and ending with the dependent clauses. And what that comes to is the comma rule. So remember, if the dependent clause is first, use a comma between the clauses. So this is not right before the word like it was on and. You're not putting a comma right before because. And it has to be if it is first.
How long do we get on the essay?
As long as you need.
So they don't time us?
Not to my knowledge. They will often change the rules to make it a little bit harder if too many people are passing, to be honest. But currently, it is not timed. And they do them on separate days. So you get all day to do the multiple choice, and then the next day you got all day to do the essay.
Ooh, good Lord, 'cause I'm
So do they give you a subject to write about, so we don't get to pick?
Nope.
So it could be the worst subject to talk about.
That's actually one of the, it could, yes. And that's one of the things I prepare you for is what to do if you have no idea what they're talking about, because that can very well happen. And that is a whole lesson. I'm actually going to hopefully cover that today in that class because you got to be prepared for that to happen. Because it very well could, yes. So this would look like, because you will study them later, you are taking notes in class. So I am still combining these same two sentences. You will study them later, complete sentence. You are taking notes in class, complete sentence. But I put this subordinating conjunction here of because. right? And since it is the first clause, you have to have a comma between the two clauses. If I had said, you are taking notes in class because you will study them later, then I have made that the second clause and no comma. And this is when it starts to get to the point that people don't do it because they're scared they're going to mess up the comma, or they're scared that they're going to make a fragment. And so better safe than sorry. And yes, you would be. Like, if you knew that you were going to mess these up every time, you are better off to just do the short sentences and not make any errors than to go for variety but mess them all up.
Well, how much do they really count on like the punctuations
Yeah.
and commas?
It's better not to use them at all to get points taken away than to try to take a chance on using them.
Well, if you're confident, if you know that you know the rule, if it is on the first half of the sentence, then, or on the first clause of the sentence, then you put a comma between it, then do that. That is better. But if for whatever reason your mind just blanks and you can't remember where the comma goes, then yes, just go short sentences. Oh, that's me on tests. I blank. I can study forever and I'm still going to blank. Okay, still with me? All right, then let me type here. Come on. Come on.
Will this be posted on Classroom?
Yeah. Type. Text pane. Yes. Just going to start typing letters so that I can then go back and fix it. There it goes. Okay. Compound complex. Your last one is exactly what it sounds like. This is using both. Using both a compound and a complex structure in the same sentence. So to do that, because compound is combining two and complex is combining two, they're going to share one. So you will have 3 or more clauses in one sentence. And this is the complicated one. This is what I was saying. There's one more that's more complicated because now you got double the comma rules. And you got to try and figure out where you're going to put them. And you have to be careful that you're not going to then make a run-on or a comma splice because you're combining so much together that it can get a little overwhelming as far as all the rules go.
What's the easier way to remember the rules?
I wish I had a cheat code for you. Just memorize them. I mean, there might be. Somebody else might be able on YouTube or something to have a better way to remember them, like Fanboys or something. I got nothing. You just memorize where the commas go. I will use the tip that I don't particularly like, and I don't like it enough that I'm not even going to put it on there. With the compound complex sentences, you can usually hear the pause. If you say it out loud, you can usually hear where you're going to pause and put that comma. But that's not a hard rule because maybe you pause in weird places. Yeah, so that's why I'm not even putting it up there. But maybe try that. Yeah. Like when I drive, I use speak to text on my car because I'm a safe driver. But if I pause too long, like if I am trying to think of what I want to say for the next word, Siri will put a comma in between them. And so then my punctuation is all messed up on my text because I just took too long pausing, thinking of the next word. So be careful on that. So you have to then remember both comma rules. So I'm going to give several examples here just to show the different comma rules. So I could say, Let's see. You are taking notes in class because you want to study them later, so you will get a good grade on the test. And you have 3 different clauses there. I'm going to leave it zoomed in because the second I start trying, even zooming, the second I start trying to change it at all, it's going to mess it up. So I will leave that on there long enough for you to write down the sentence. And then I'm going to go in and mark stuff and put commas in. To count as a compound complex, to be a, specifically compound complex, yes, they have to be independent. When, like, that's the official answer. When it comes to grading the actual SOL, they're not counting it. Like, it doesn't say on the thing uses compound complex sentences. It just says uses complex sentence structure, I think. So you could say you are taking notes in class and will study them later because you want to get a good grade. That is still combining all 3 ideas, and they are probably going to view that just as well as they do this. But to count as officially a compound complex sentence, for the sake of the multiple choice part and for the sake of quizzes and tests that we will have in here, you have to have the independent clauses. Okay, so you are taking notes in class. Put that in, we'll highlight them separately. So you are taking notes in class. That's an independent clause. You want to study them later. That's an independent clause. Oh, come on. They changed codes on me and everything. 839 ELG. 839 ELG. That is the correct code. Oh, apparently my Wi-Fi went out. That's why. We're going to take a break after I finish the notes, but I don't want to take it until I've done that last note. Come on. I can switch to my phone if I have to. Come on. There it goes. All right.
When you're taking the SOL, will the what you have, will that be up there so you can go back and see?
The rubric?
Yeah.
No. Mm-hmm. All right. And then you will get a good grade on the test. Independent clause. So you have, and now it's on a delay, you have 3 complete sentences in there. And to be better safe than sorry, you could say, you are taking notes in class, period. You want to study them later, period. You will get a good grade on the test, period. That is grammatically correct. But to make it look fancier and make it sound fancier and check that box that says uses good sentence variety, you want to combine them as long as it still makes sense. And you don't have on there, you are taking notes in class because you want to study them later and your favorite color is purple. Like, they have to all go together and you can get the punctuation right. So here I have added the subordinating conjunction to the second half of the sentence, the second clause. Therefore, I do not have a comma here, because if it's on the second clause, no comma. if I had done it like I did up here and said, because you will study them later, you are taking notes in class, still would have used the comma. But to then make it more complicated, once you have combined two sentences, let's turn off my highlight. No black. Once, oh my God, whatever. I'm going to unhighlight that in a second. Once you have combined one set, that now counts as its own clause, as its own sentence, as one clause for the sake of comma rules. Explain what I mean by that once I take off the highlight. And here, because we have complete sentences on both sides of the coordinating conjunction, so this makes it a compound sentence, this makes it a complex sentence, so it's compound complex. It's really getting frustrating. Change to yellow. You have to have that comma. My goodness. Now I got to zoom out because I can't see where the space is. There we go. So this one is on the second half, meaning no comma here. This one has complete sentences on both sides, so that has to have that comma.
Are you just putting the comma because it's a fanboy before?
Because it uses the fanboy and because it has complete sentences on both sides. It has to be both sides.
So if it's only like one complete sentence, but it's got the fanboy, which is still the comma?
If it's, like if I had said, for those watching the video later, when I'm getting frustrated, it's because the screen is going out. If it had said, you are taking notes in class and want a good grade. Want a good grade is not a complete sentence, so no, you would not use a comma. But if you say, and you want a good grade, then yes, comma, because you want a good grade is a complete sentence. So it only depends on if it's complete or not. All right, turn the screen back on, reconnect. We're almost done. I got one more thing to say. Hopefully the screen will make it that long. Okay, so once you combine one set, that now counts as one clause for the sake of comma rules. So let me, off the top of my head here, think of an example. If I said, let's see. Because you want to, oh my God. Okay, because you want to, I'm going to type it. That way I don't have to worry about it messing up, and then I can put it back on the screen. Because you want to study them later and get a good grade on the test, you are taking notes in class. All right, get the screen back on. We're so close. Start, mirror, on the literal last line here, screen. All right, so you have, because you want to study them later, or no, sorry, you want to study them later. Complete sentence. That's going to go in blue. And you have, you are taking notes in class. Complete sentence going in blue. But now, get a good grade on the test. I'm actually going to add a word there. So if you're still typing, put in the word so here. This one's going to have 2 fanboys. And highlight. Then a subordinating conjunction there. Okay. What? Oh my God, please don't stop messing up screen. There. Okay. Because you want to study them later and get a good grade on the test, so you are taking notes in class. That is not a very good sentence, but for the sake of me showing you the comma rule, it's going to work. Since you want to study, whatever, and you are taking notes in class. Pretend the wording is better, but it's still showing my comma. This, get a good grade on the test, is not a complete sentence. You have used a fanboy here. So you would think if you were only going by this clause right before the fanboy that you would not use a comma. But you are now doing, because you want to study them later and get a good grade on the test, you have now put 2 of those together. Actually, if I just take out because probably make more sense. Sorry, the screen is throwing me off. My example is not the best because of that. There we go. This is now one independent clause. You want to study them later and get a good grade on the test. That is a complete sentence. And therefore, because you have a complete sentence on this side and a complete sentence on this side, you use that comma there. So you can't just go by the clause that is right before the fanboy if this is now a complete sentence. Once you have combined 2 together, that is now one sentence. And then you determine whether or not to use the comma here. And this goes to that, yes. And this goes to that kind of hearing it. Because if you said you want to study them later and get a good grade on the test, so you are taking notes in class, you kind of hear the pause in that one. You can hear where the tone switches. But again, that just depends on how you say it out loud to yourself. So I'm not putting it on the notes, but just as a tip, if in doubt, try reading it to yourself. You can probably hear where the pause goes as to whether or not you should put a comma there.
So everybody that does the essay on this, is this going to be a different subject they give everybody?
Everyone will have the potential to get different ones. Are some of them probably going to repeat? Yeah, probably. But for the most part, like if everybody in here was to take the essay on the same day, probably 2 of you would get the same topic, but everybody else would have a different one. They have several that they choose from. Okay. So questions on any of those notes? Now, you speak like that. People would say, you want to study them later, or you change it to I want to study them later and get a good grade on the test, so I'm taking notes in class. That is something that any of you would have said. So you speak in compound complex sentences. It's just whether or not you remember where the commas go. It just comes down to making sure you know the comma rules, making sure you know the order to put them in. For the sake of future notes, I'm going to change this to in order to, that way it is more of a subordinating conjunction. in order to. All right, questions? Take a break. 7 minutes. That puts us back at 9:48.